You are listening to KC Sports Network, the #1 podcast network for today's Kansas City sports fans. With former players from your favorite teams, informed perspectives, and former insiders, this is the place for you. KC Sports Network is proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible.
Hello and welcome into Mizzou, That's Who, here on the Kansas City Sports Network, your home for Missouri athletics. I'm joined by Gabe DeArmond and Maggie Johnson, as always. Last time we talked, in the middle of these two podcasts, I had a battle with the flu, influenza A. So I'm coming off of that, so I apologize if you might hear me clear my throat, or if you cough, or if you hear me blow my nose or make any weird bodily noises. I apologize. Good players adjust. We're getting through it. We're going to talk about Missouri football and Missouri basketball because it is crossover season. It is the season where we get to talk a little bit of hoops, a little bit of football as well. Missouri coming off a 21-17 loss to Kentucky, a game that I don't know. It could have been their best chance to become bowl eligible, to get to bowl eligibility in the game. But I'd probably say that before Arkansas lost to Liberty. But Arkansas still is there. They've got a tough game this week against Tennessee. But Gabe, your first reactions from the 21-17 loss from Missouri.
Okay, so I actually want to pass this off to Maggie first and to you because I want to know what you guys were thinking because, like, this fan base has seen some stuff over the last 30 years. So I just want to know on the call, like, first reaction, what you guys were thinking, and then I'll come back.
So there was a point in the game I was seeing. I was at the game. I was in Columbia, and it was when the fumble happened, or the fumble that was overturned as a fumble. And I look at my friend, and I've been talking to the guys that sit in the row behind me, and I'm like, please just give us this. I'm like, we don't get anything, like, ever. Like, it's probably not a fumble, but just give us this call because and then obviously it was that. And I just knew in that moment that nothing was going to go Now, I didn't expect what was going to happen because how could you? I mean, we've lost in a lot of very weird ways. Like you said, for the past 30 years. I didn't expect a roughing the punter 40 yards behind the line of scrimmage. I don't think anybody expected that, but it just never ends. And you sit here as a fan, which is like what I am on this podcast, and you just have to wonder, like, when will we get our break? And I mean, people will sit there and be like, well, you had 2007 and you had 2013, but it was, we didn't really get anything out of those. I mean, we got a Cotton Bowl. I mean, that's a decent bowl game, but not even a BCS game and all of this. So you just, as a fan, you just sit there and you're like, when are we going to not be that joke? Because that's what it feels like. Like, at the point, I'm having, like, Iowa State fans and Oklahoma fans reach out to me and be like, man, I didn't realize that your guys' luck was as bad as it is. And obviously not all those plays aren't the whole game, but they feel like the whole game in that moment.
Right. Yeah. I think it's really interesting because the roughing the punter obviously is going to be something that's talked about for a while when you talk about this game, just because that rule is so interesting and the way that they enforce the rule is interesting. And I saw people tweet out screenshots of what the rule was, and him still being in the tackle box, I think, is the argument that they gave to Drinkwitz, but I don't know if that's what the true intent of the rule, when you read the rule, is. It's just an interpretation. It's all confusing. And that also comes down to judgment by the official, is one of those things. So that's also tough. It seems like a lot of the judgment calls by officials aren't in Missouri's favor. So it's one of those things where it's just like you throw your hands up and you're just like, well, what can we do there? But I think you can start by, having a competent offense. That's probably what you can do. But I thought the defense played well. The offense didn't. And that's just it followed a similar script of Missouri games the whole year. This is just a game, I think, kind of a microcosm of the defense keeping them in a game, the offense flailing and struggling, and then something very weird happens at the end for them to lose the game. It just followed just the same similar script.
I was 14 years old, and I remember listening on the radio to the 5th down game. I was a junior in college. I was covering the kicked ball game. And I was a freshman in college for Tyus Edney, but like that one's different. That's, hey, somebody made a play, right? That's not a weird, what the hell call at the end. So this one, my first thought was, and I think I might have written this, I said, what I love about this job that I have is literally every day I go to work, I know I might see something I've never seen before, right? I mean, I did on Saturday. It wasn't really necessarily positive, but I saw something I'd never seen. It's 3 days later, and I still can't say for sure if the call was right or wrong. I mean, by the letter of the law, you can argue that's the right call. Right. But I don't, if they hadn't made that call, I don't really think anybody would have said, well, that should have been roughing the punter. You know, and like I've been impressed with Missouri. I haven't seen anybody blame Will Norris. There's nothing else that you coach him to do. He did nothing wrong in that situation. To tell you the truth, Kentucky got rewarded for doing the wrong thing, because I promise what Mark Stoops has coached that punter to do in that situation is to kick the ball directly out the back of the end zone. Right. That is what you should do there. You take your safety, you're up 21-19, you free kick to a Missouri offense that is incapable of doing anything. Give them the ball on their 25 and say, if you can go 50 yards and beat us on a field goal with your kicker that is kind of 50-50 at this point, then more power to you than you just did. But that's what they should have done. They didn't. It worked out for them. But the other thing, and like I will fully admit, Missouri has had more of these kick in the nut endings than most teams have, like more than their fair share. But also, like the reaction immediately after that game is, how come this only happens to us? Well, and I didn't think about this till a couple days later, but think about if that penalty is not called. Let's say Missouri gets the ball on the 30-yard line and goes and scores and wins the game. A Kentucky fan goes to bed on Saturday night going, literally all we had to do was snap the ball to the punter and we win. That's all we had to do. And we couldn't even do that. So I think my point is, I think it does happen to other teams. Now, maybe not quite as often, but I think it does happen to other teams. We just don't really know about it or don't pay attention to them.
I think an issue with that play, though, too, which is what sucks, is, and like you said, it is by the rule, probably the right call. But in the rule, it also says once the kicker establishes that he's going to kick the ball. And that's where it becomes subjective. Yeah. And I don't think any referee, I mean, if I was a Kentucky fan in that, and I was reading a lot of comments, they're like, well, that's the rule. That's the rule. Like, we won because that's the rule. If they were on the other side, they'd feel the exact same way as us. They wouldn't be like, right. Well. And
if Missouri fans were on the other side, they'd also be saying, well, that's the rule.
Exactly. Yeah. But Missouri fans would be like, oh my God, a call went our way. Like, a call never goes our way. You know, we would just, like, it would just be this whole, like, because nobody expected him to snap the ball like that. Not only did we not expect him to kick the ball, get the roughing the punter, no one expected, you know, it's a routine play. This, I mean, are there bad snaps all the time? Of course, but it was routine.
Well, that part about establishing himself in a kicking position is the part that, like you said, I don't think he established himself in a kicking position, but at the same time, he did kick the ball and it went downfield. So it's hard to say he wasn't in a kicking position because he did kick the ball. So I don't know if it was the right call. I mean, I don't think anybody could have argued if it wasn't called. That said, the reason they lost that game is they have an offense that can't do anything right for most of the game. Not because of that call. And I give Missouri fans credit in this. I don't think most fans have said that call lost the game. I mean, that call contributed. It was a factor. Mm-hmm. But there were a lot of chances in that game for that call to not be a factor. Missouri had 19 yards passing at halftime. They had 80 total yards late in the third quarter. I mean, you don't deserve to win a game where that's the case.
2 for 13 on third downs as well.
Yeah.
That's not going to win you a football game. 1 for 3 on fourth downs, 60 total plays, and they ran the same amount of plays as Kentucky. But No, and they were also least penalized. Kentucky had 12 penalties for 84 yards, Missouri 7 for 71, which is a Missouri team that has seemingly been undisciplined on the penalty side of things. Again, the offensive line goes down with another injury. I don't know the severity of, again, I'm not going to try to pronounce his name but I'm going to mess it up. Go ahead, Gabe.
EJ and Doma Ogar, but it sounds like Drinkwitz said he'll be out for a while. I mean, there's only a while left in the season. I think he's done.
He leaving the field, he was not putting any pressure on that. And he was hopping on one foot leaving the field. It did not look good. So again, the offensive line that has had a whole lot of trouble protecting is getting new guys shoved in there. Now, what week are we in the season? Week 10, week 11 into the season. So that's not going to be good moving forward for the cohesiveness of this offense. But yeah, I mean, 232 total yards of offense, 143 passing, 89 on the ground, 3.9 yards per play for the Missouri offense. You look at those numbers, you're like, oh, that's not too bad. That's not too bad. But as Gabe, as you mentioned, a lot of those happened in the fourth quarter of that offense. So, and it is not good. We've conditioned ourselves as Missouri fans to look at those numbers and be like, no, it's okay. We can do something with that.
And here's the thing. What did we say last week? What did anybody that was actually paying attention say last week? The offense wasn't great against South Carolina. They just didn't screw up. That's what happened this week. They screwed up. I mean, Brady Cook is rolling right. Luther Burden is open. There is a 7-yard throw for a first down. I mean, he just was. I don't know how else to say it. But even if you don't throw the ball, okay, you're going to run. Okay, cool, run. Oh, but you just dropped the ball. Nobody hit him. Nobody was close to him. He just dropped the ball. And again, it's not just that this offense makes mistakes. It's that, it's not that it backs up over your foot. It's that once it backs up over your foot, it's like, all right, now I'm going to leave this 7,000-pound car here for a minute. Okay, then I'm going to pull forward and I'm going to do it again. And now I want you to just stand in front of my car and I'm just going to flat run over you and you're going to bounce off my windshield. I mean, it's the worst possible thing at every time.
Yeah, it's just so frustrating. Like you said, I saw obviously the fumble, but it was on the Kentucky side, so I couldn't necessarily see if he held the ball out, if it fell out while it was tucked. I couldn't tell. I didn't rewatch it. But a mistake that shouldn't happen. Another thing I feel like we need to talk about, though, is the penalty, the unsportsmanlike conduct penalty on the Kentucky bench.
I got in big trouble talking about that on Twitter on Saturday.
Well, what did you say?
Well, so understand where I sit. I mean, I've said this a number of times. People watching on TV have a better view of things than I do. I am on the 6th floor on the opposite side of the stadium, so I can see nothing going on live. So I saw one replay, and on the replay I saw, it looked like Darius Robinson had Trajan Jeffcoat in a bear hug, walking him off the sidelines. And it looked like things they were jawing, but it didn't look like anything big was going on. And then Josh Landry kind of came in and shoved somebody. So based on that replay, I tweeted, I said, I think the call is right because it looked to me like Josh Landry escalated this. And oh my God, I mean, it was the only thing anybody replied to the rest of the game. I had 150 replies. I was told to F off, many things. And I was like, all right, guys, I might be wrong. I fully admit I might be wrong here. It's okay. It's not that important, but I apparently was wrong. And I fully admit I did not see the whole thing.
Well, the Twitter video that they have up is not the entire, the one that you've seen. I mean, I put it up yesterday, being kind of snarky, but you can't see what escalated the issue. You just kind of see them all going at it. But the fact that there's also Kentucky players, number 85 in particular, didn't look up his name or anything, is hanging out in the background, not involved in it, and then literally just runs up and starts throwing hands. I mean, and the ref was right there in that instant. Whenever the original flag was thrown, it was by a guy that was pretty far away and couldn't see very much stuff. You could see him throw the flag. So it was a very dicey situation where there should have probably been offset penalties at, the most. I don't think that was a scuffle. That should have been Missouri only.
I thought we were gonna have a full-on fight in that game for a little. Like I was trying to get Markel Lutzie's name and call him and say, "Yo, they need you back in Columbia, man." If you remember him from the Florida brawl at halftime a couple of years ago.
That game is chippy, and these two teams don't like each other. Like that was
No.
very clear that you can tell these two teams don't like each other. There is a budding rivalry between Missouri and Kentucky, and I mean, you had quotes from players saying, "Hey, we don't like Kentucky at all" during media days. I can't remember who said it, but
it was Martez Manuel, and I wouldn't
That's right.
like somebody that beat me 7 times in 8 years either. Like this can't be a rivalry if Missouri's not ever going to win it.
that's true.
Which is another frustrating part about the entire thing is that so many of these games have been decided, and I'm sorry, I shouldn't use the word decided because we also didn't score in the second half in 2018 whenever the offensive or the pass interference call or whatever was called or lack thereof and whatever.
But they have come down to a call.
They've come down to a call, and that's what's frustrating, especially like when you hear Kentucky fans chirping all the time. It's because they've been on the right side of these calls, and it just very as easily could have been swapped in what was called or not.
My favorite part of that, though, is because it has happened 3 times, but is SEC just looking out for them. Yes, because Kentucky football is the golden child of the Southeastern Conference. That's the team that Greg Sankey is looking out for every Saturday.
Have to protect the sanctity of the old SEC, of the old guard.
Right. Kentucky football and Alabama basketball are the 2 teams that they really want to do well.
And Kentucky football that's never made an SEC championship, mind you, like ever.
Right. Like I'm not saying the calls haven't been bad. I'm not saying Missouri fans should be mad. I'm just saying it's not because the SEC really wants Kentucky to win 8 games instead of 7.
Right. I think that we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the defense, but I think it kind of goes without saying that defense obviously kept Mizzou in this game. I mean, it was 7-3 at halftime. It was 14-3 going into the fourth quarter. I mean, you can't ask for anything more for a team to hold.
But you have to with this team. Like
they have to score. Is what it comes down to. Is the defense has to score. The defense has to score points.
The defense played an A-, B+ game. Like it wasn't their best game. It was plenty good to win. Except that this team needs them to be perfect. I mean, they need to be absolutely perfect. They can't have I think Kentucky converted 2 third downs on the opening drive. The game-winning touchdown came on a 3rd and 11, which was the only throw all day, by the way, that I saw Will Levis make that I saw. I guess I could see an NFL team taking him. I mean, he's a fine player. Don't get me wrong. He was the better quarterback in that game, but I don't, this first round stuff is insanity, but he made some nice throws, but you can't tell your defense, you can't give up 4 plays all day. That's too many.
It's so frustrating to watch and just to see how good the defense does play. I mean, yeah, you mentioned it, Gabe, that maybe wasn't their best game that they had, but still a very good performance from the defense. And Missouri can't do anything with it. You only allow a team 7 points at halftime and you can only muster 3 points yourself. That's not a good sign. You only allow 14 points in 3 quarters and you can only muster 3 yourself. Again, and not a good sign.
Barely 3. We benefited of them having 12 men, which I didn't know.
Right.
I didn't know that was reviewable. I don't know why I didn't know that too many men was reviewable, but I'm glad it was. The entire stadium knew that there were too many men on the field. The only people that didn't were the referees who didn't call it. So.
But the weird thing was the refs never even signaled if the field goal was good because they were busy counting Kentucky players. It was like, it was like Kentucky wasn't ready for the snap, but all of a sudden Missouri saw the play clock at 3 and just immediately rushed it and snapped it, which may have impacted the kick. But the refs weren't ready either because they were busy counting Kentucky players and nobody ever actually said if Mevis made the kick or not.
Well, I didn't even think if we were ready because Connor Wood also ran on late. And I was like, what? So at first I thought that like when they weren't signaling that we were having an issue and like we were getting called with something. And then I'm like, wait, there are 12 men on the field right now, or there were. So I don't know. It was a very weird play. We did benefit that, but I mean, it was a penalty. It should have been called. So
it was a super sloppy game. Like, it was two teams that looked like they were both not really interested in winning. I mean, like in the end, it didn't impact the game, but I think I said I was offended as somebody who likes football in the last 2 minutes of the first half by what in the world the coaches were doing. I mean, like Eli Drinkwitz calling timeouts to get the ball back to his offense that can't do anything, and then taking a knee, but Mark Stoops not calling timeouts to force it.
Right.
I don't get it, man. It's like sometimes they need guys on the sideline saying, this is what you should do here.
Yeah.
Oh, is it like an offensive coordinator?
or just like me. I don't know. I knew what they should have done.
Like us. They need people like the fans.
Just put me on the headset, coach. Just give me in the headset.
Look, I'm not saying I can call plays. I'm not saying I can do anything, but I can tell you when you should use a timeout.
Yeah.
That's it.
I don't know. The fans might ask you if you're there to ask Drink why he keeps running the screen pass, because I heard that anymore while sitting in those stands. I was going to lose my mind.
He runs the screen pass because his offensive line can't protect for longer than a second. That's why it happens. But 19 penalties in this game. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And it was a flag fest for sure. Missouri travels to take on, I don't know what number they are now. I didn't even pull it up. The game preview.
The playoff rankings don't come out until Tuesday night.
That's right.
Tennessee will be either 4 or 5 this week.
So they go to take on a college football playoff contender. Missouri's 21-point dogs in this game. Take that as you will. I don't think this game will be close. Hendon Hooker, I think, is the legit real deal. I think that Kentucky is good. I do think that game against Georgia, I do think that Tennessee is a legit national championship contender. I don't know. That game against Georgia was kind of weird. I thought that game would be a little bit closer, but I think that they could legit win a national title. I think they could probably beat Ohio State. They could probably beat Michigan, whichever one comes out of the Big Ten. So this is a legit good team. And this is probably going to be the next, we talked about this, Gabe, a couple episodes ago, where you talk about 1 and 2 is going to be Tennessee and Georgia. And you're trying to get to that number 3 with them in the SEC East. But man, I don't see this game going any remotely well for
what would be a good day for the Missouri defense this weekend. Like if Tennessee scores how many points, you say, you know what, that defense played pretty well.
I mean, based on last year, I would say under 40 points. I mean, and I know that sounds bad. Like maybe I should say 30, under 30 points.
So let's say Missouri's defense plays pretty well and Tennessee scores 30. I mean, it's a 2 touchdown. Like how does Missouri come within 2 touchdowns?
Yeah, no, Missouri's not going to score any points.
I mean, the good news is that Tennessee's defense isn't very good either. But we've played a lot of teams with not good defense.
Right. I mean, they legitimately scored 17 against Vanderbilt.
Mm-hmm.
They have scored. Outside of Abilene Christian and Louisiana Tech, they haven't scored more than 23 points in a game.
We love 17. I feel like, well, we've had at least 3 games that we've scored 17 points.
And 17 just, I can't invent a world where that beats Kentucky. I know they just scored 13, but I don't know. I think this Missouri defense is really good. I'm not sure it's Georgia at this point.
It's not. It's not going to be a Georgia defense. No offense to the Missouri defense at all. But just like Georgia is just like on a different level. Like they got NFL dudes walking around there. Now Missouri's probably got a couple NFL dudes on there.
Missouri's got some.
Yeah, but they don't have the amount of Georgia does. But I mean, I don't think they can hold Tennessee to 13 points.
Right.
And
that's what it has. That's what it would have to be.
It would. The hard part is going to be is that defense, that Missouri defense, is going to be on the field a whole lot. because Missouri's offense isn't going to be able to do anything against this Tennessee defense that isn't very good, but also is probably better than a lot of the defenses they face.
Although the criticism of Josh Heupel's offense always has been that the opposing defense isn't on the field very much,
That's
right?
fair.
Because even when they score, it takes like a minute and 12 seconds. So like time of possession means nothing to Josh Heupel. So the defense, I mean, when they're out there, it's super fast paced and running all over the place. It's a lot of plays. It may not be a lot of game time, but what that does require is an offense that is able to control the ball and move the chains. And again, the reason this season is so, I don't know, put in whatever word you want, but it's just the same discussion every week. Like somebody said on our message board, we have the same arguments every week, guys. And I said, well, that's because they play the same game every week. You know, I mean, it's just the same thing.
Another thing that I think won't help us with the Tennessee game as opposed to the Georgia game is playing at Neyland. I mean, they're going to hear, I mean, it's going to be the loudest environment they've ever played in. I would say almost every single one of those players. Because even 2 years ago, for those that did play there 2 years ago, it's a different vibe being a title contender.
108,000. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be different. It's going to be loud. It's going to be crazy. And I think that our crowd helped us, you know, in that Georgia game for sure. Our defense, most definitely. It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard for our offense to hear anything in that stadium.
And I saw some Missouri fans coming out of that game saying, hey, well, maybe this sets up well. Tennessee's going to be let down because their season's done. It's not. Tennessee has every chance to still make the college football playoff. I think a pretty good chance. So they still have everything to play for. And like somewhere below the surface in this is I doubt Josh Heupel has a lot of sympathy for Missouri fans. And I doubt Josh Heupel in Tennessee have a lot of sympathy for, even though he didn't mean it the way it was taken, Missouri's head coach who kind of threw a barb at Tennessee again before the season started. You know, I can't remember the exact comment, but it was something about, you know, their record or what his record could have been against Tennessee using not ineligible recruits or something like that. You know, I don't know if you guys remember that. It was preseason and he meant it as a joke. He meant it as saying kudos to Tennessee. I'm 0-2 against them. They've kicked my ass. But that's not the way it came across or was taken by Tennessee fans.
Right.
Yeah, I did actually forget about that until you just mentioned that again. But you know what?
I mean, if the question is, has Eli Drinkwitz taken a shot at this team Missouri's about to play this week? The answer is usually yes, if we're being honest.
Right. But we lost by 40 something last year. I mean, I'm already hurt. Truly, they can't really hurt me anymore. I mean, I'm sure they could, but
I mean, I have seen 73-0 and 66-0 at Missouri. That Tennessee game was like right there with those. It was every bit as uncompetitive.
It was embarrassing. I remember that game just being like, oh my goodness, like this
was bad.
This is embarrassing. Yeah. I was just skimming through Josh Heupel's comments from his opening press conference. He didn't really say anything about Missouri, just said they got a good defense, preparing for a defense. Not shocked.
Josh is elite at not saying anything. Absolutely elite. Like I remember one day he used to have his own press conferences here because the offensive coordinator did a press conference because at that time the head coach basically, he's like, I don't know, talk to Heupel about the offense. And so we would talk to Heupel about the offense. And one day he does his 10, 15 minutes. And as he's walking out of the room, he just looked down at me and Dave Matter and said, bet you guys got a lot out of that. Like he was so proud of himself for saying absolutely nothing.
I wish we used things that fans or whatever said about us as motivation. Because, for 10 years, they've been saying, you don't belong, you're this and that. And you feel like other teams use so much motivation against us. I'm like, why don't we use that?
Well, I mean, Missouri tried. Literally last week, Martez Manuel was saying, I talked to the team about how we have to beat Kentucky because nobody respects us in this league. But to do that, you got to go win the game.
Yeah.
Is it bad? I still wish that Missouri was in the Big 12. Maybe that's a deeper conversation.
I will refrain public comment. We can direct message about that later. I don't want to get people mad at me.
That's fair. People can be mad at me that I still wish that we were in the Big 12. But okay.
Hang on real quick. Should we talk about 2 more years of Eli?
Yeah.
What did you guys think about that when it came out?
The timing was very odd to me. I think that if he would have beat Kentucky and they said, 2 years, I'd have been like, okay, that makes sense. Maybe. But before the game, I was confused. I did read like what you were talking about on Power Mizzou a little bit, Gabe, and it was just like, it doesn't really mean that much. Like, you can still get out of it. It's like,
it only means that much if there's more money, if it costs more money to fire him than it would have last week. And we don't know that yet because the university hasn't released the contract yet.
Right.
But hey, I mean, my very first thought was, oh no, they're going to lose this game today and the takes are going to be amazing. And they were. I mean, it's dumb, obviously, right? Because again, it doesn't really mean that much. Like, Barry Odom got a contract extension in December of 2018, and he was fired 12 months later. So they don't mean it. I mean, Jimbo Fisher is under contract for 8 more years, and there's legitimately people going, "Yo, do you think they'll fire him?" I mean, like, contracts are stupid. I don't even know why anybody signs him at this point.
I think his contract's like,
to get their money.
His contract's like what, 80 million or something?
It's $86 million, I think. Yeah. But so even though it was dumb, I was like, oh God, it's going to be amazing to see the comments if they lose this game. And it was not disappointing. The comments were there.
It happened like early in the morning, right? I feel like it was like
they released it at like 9:15 because I legitimately just picked up my bag. I was about to walk out of my house to go to the game, and I got a call. Hey, you're about to get an email contract extension. I'm like, oh, so I guess I'll just sit back down and write before I go to the game, and then that's cool.
Yeah, I was tailgating with my Twitter group chat. So when that came out, of course, you don't even have to chat about it. Like, you're in person talking about it.
Yeah, I was confused, I think. But I think that overall, as you mentioned, the years are kind of dummy years when it comes down to it. The NFL does this a lot with contracts, as they put dummy years on the end of it to kind of so they can opt out of them, stuff like that. Whatever. I guess whatever makes the university happy, but I guess the appearance of having stability in the program is good, and that's kind of the way that I spun it in my tweet. But like, I don't know, the timing was weird. I don't know why they didn't wait just till the end of the season to announce anything, or till the
because what if they're 5-7?
Right.
Yeah, but I think being 5-7 wouldn't have done anything. Like, I think that 5-7, would have been like, okay, fine.
Yeah. Yes. I guess you have to announce it when it's done, right? And it was done. I mean, it's not going to stay quiet for 3 weeks, so you have to say something at some point. But again, so at the end of this year, under his previous contract, they would owe him $8.4 million if they fired him. At the end of next year, they would owe him 5.6. The only thing I care about is what those numbers are now. What is the number that you are going to owe him if you fire him after 2023? Because it is still certainly on the table that you're going to be in a position where that's what you need to do after 2023. And so, hey, if we owe him $6 million instead of 5.6, whatever, I don't care about that. If we owe him $11 million instead of 5.6, then Jimmy Sexton just took Missouri out back and did unspeakable things to them.
Right. Yeah, that's going to be interesting to see. It was confusing. I'm still just trying to figure it out. I've kind of blocked it out of my memory. I've got a memory like a goldfish. So it's one of those things where, like, after the game happened, I was focused on what was happening during the game, and then I was telling you guys before the podcast, I was focused on Missouri basketball, and I had to remember what happened in Missouri football just because I can only focus on one thing at a time. So.
You're probably not old enough to get this reference, but you're like Kelly Bundy on Married with Children. Like, you have room for a finite number of things in your head. And so every time you learn a new thing, the older thing just leaves your memory entirely.
It's exactly what happens. I am a quarterback coach's dream because I cannot remember the last play. I've got a memory of a good quarterback. But let's move on and talk about Missouri basketball now. They've had 2 games. One of them counted. The other one didn't. Gabe, you were there for both, correct?
I was, yeah.
I want to know firsthand your thoughts on the Dennis Gates experience.
I mean, so far it's been what you would want it to be, relatively comfortable wins, playing a lot of guys. The most interesting thing that I think has happened in these two, in the exhibition in the first game, is he basically has said, I am experimenting with things and I'm kind of messing with my guys to see how they react. I mean, he said after the exhibition, he said, I was intentionally taking guys out off the floor before they were in a rhythm to see how they did. Then last night when Southern Indiana suddenly began shooting like Michael Jordan in Space Jam, and or like the Larry Bird commercial for McDonald's where he was like off the window, all that was Southern Indiana in the second half. Yeah. And Gates said after the game, he said, I could have changed defenses. I could have gone to something else. I could have called timeout. There's a lot of things I could have done, but I didn't want to because I wanted them to have to figure it out. And I kind of like it because there was no point where you thought Missouri was losing that game.
Right.
So if they do have to play through that, maybe there's a benefit, against Arkansas in a month and a half or against Illinois or whatever, where they can kind of look back and say, hey, we've been through something like this before and coach let us figure it out. And I think that kind of fits with what the guys last week, I think it was Sean East. I asked him to describe what it's like playing for Coach Gates. And he said, it's structured freedom. Like he lets us do what we want for the first 8 to 10 seconds. Then if we haven't gotten it done, then he's going to call out a set. And we're going to do, what he wants us to do, but he's going to give us the chance to go make a play first, which I like it. I think it's good.
Yeah,
I watched the whole game too. And like you said, there was no real point in that game. Did I think that we were going to lose? I mean, the game was 97-91 and they made a bank shot 3 with a couple seconds left. I mean, right. It was closer to a 10-point game almost the entire time. I mean, we were up 20, so I can't, whatever. But you can't control this. It had Norfolk State written all over it. That's exactly how it felt, where it was just like, what can you do? We didn't play badly. Like, even in that Norfolk State game, they didn't play badly. Norfolk State just didn't miss until the next game when they played Florida and they couldn't make anything. But that's just kind of what it was. I mean, we're not going to allow 15 threes by every team that we play. They're not going to be banking in threes all the time. I felt I had so much more fun watching them play Southern Indiana than I had watching them play almost every game last year. The Auburn game was kind of fun, but any other game I didn't have fun, and I had a lot more fun watching last night.
15 for 30 is what Southern Indiana ended on the day.
After 1 for 13 in the first half.
Right. So the clip that they were on, close to 75% to get to where they were. They were not missing.
So they scored 28 points in the last 4:47 of that game. Like if you extrapolate that over the entire game, they would score 224 points in the Division I basketball game. It's incredible.
Well, people were saying things about the defense as well. They're like, well, the defense was so bad, they gave up this many. They only shot a few less free throws in the first half than 3-pointers in the first half than they did the second half.
Right.
They just weren't making them. They just weren't making them in the first half. I mean, and that's why when people were like, well, that was a defensive issue. They were playing the same defense. They just weren't making them. So I
also think 3-point defense, I think, is kind of overrated. I mean, 22-foot jump shots, sometimes they go in and sometimes they don't. Right now, sometimes you can contest them and all that. I get it. But it's not like you have 5 guys out on the 3-point line with a hand in somebody's face all the time.
Yeah, that Lakes kid just wasn't missing, is the fact of the matter. He was throwing stuff. It was reminding me, have you seen Along Came Polly when they're playing outside a basketball and the guy's like, Rain Man, and like let it rain, and just like shooting the ball. It's just like wildly. That's how he looked like he was shooting, but the ball was going in the hoop every time.
Right.
Yeah. Kobe Brown, 20 points. Nick Honor with 10. DeAndre Golson, 11. Demoy Hodge, 11. Sean East with 12. Trey Gamillion with 12 as well. Listen, I've been really impressed with Sean East and a little bit we've been able to see of him. I think that I've been encouraged with how he looks handling the ball. That's what Missouri's really been missing, I think, a lot is a ball handler. And Nick Honor's that as well. Nick Honor's one of those guys that
Are you going to tell me that you didn't like the Boogie Coleman takes one step across midcourt, picks up his dribble, turns his back to the basket? You didn't like that play?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you,
because Missouri ran that play a lot last year.
Yeah, they were missing a competent ball handler to bring the ball up the floor, and they've got a couple. I think when you start to look at Nick Honor is a guy that is going to be valuable, I think, to this team. CY talked about him a lot on our conversation about just how he can hit the open three. He's a guy who's been around the block. He was at Clemson. He's about one of the only guys that played at the high major level that's on this team. So I think his experience is going to be valuable. You could see it on the court. He was on the court a long time. I don't know, 23 minutes, didn't play. I mean, Kobe Brown obviously played 29. He's probably going to lead the team in minutes, I'd assume, just because is it fair to say he's the best player on the team?
He had a double-double in the first half. In the first half, he had a double-double. So
I think he's clearly their best player.
As of now, I mean, I don't want to
at this level, and nobody else has.
Right. I don't want to pigeonhole myself into anything yet, because you could see, who knows, Demoy Hodge come out and be a baller, and be the best player on this team. So as of now, Kobe Brown, balling out. Love to see it. 20 points, 14 boards. Overall, I was impressed with kind of how they played. Jarrett Sutton, you could listen to a podcast of him on this same here network with the Border War podcast. He was on the call. I thought he did a very good job as well. I know I don't know if you were listening to the call, Gabe, but Jarrett Sutton, very good. I thought Jarrett Sutton doing very good.
I actually wrote down to be shout out Jarrett Sutton because I also thought he did a very good job. And I mean, it's always cool to see a Mizzou alum. And I actually went to school at the same time for a couple of years while he was there, and I had some classes with him. So yeah, it was super cool to hear him do that, and he did great.
They had I looked up a couple numbers this morning. So last year they averaged 66 possessions a game. They had 81 last night. Then last year they had a turnover percentage of 21.6, which means they turned the ball over on 21.6% of their possessions. That ranked 339th. Last night it was 13.6, which would have ranked 6th in college basketball last year. So
how many?
363, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Like all right. I thought it was something close to that.
So it was. I mean, anything that starts with a 3, it's not great unless it's just 3. 3 is good.
Right. Yeah. No. In Southern Indiana, Screaming Eagles. Cool nickname. That is a super cool nickname. Next game up for the Missouri Tigers, they take on the vaunted Penn Quakers.
Yes.
And they come to Mizzou Arena. Missouri has not had to travel yet, so we don't know how this team reacts to a road circumstance. But Friday, November the 11th at 7 p.m. at Mizzou Arena, the Penn Quakers take on Dennis Gates' Missouri Tigers. I think a lot of this time here in this early, I guess, it's a non-conference schedule. I wanted to say preseason, but I was like, I know that's not right. The non-conference schedule is going to be feeling out this team. And I think Dennis Gates, Gabe, as you said, Dennis Gates is doing the same thing. Dennis Gates is still trying to figure out what he got here. Got here in March. So like, he's just still like trying to figure some stuff out with what he has with these guys on the floor, getting them in some actual games here is good to see that, and getting him in some situations. And I kind of like the process he's going after it. I like that he said that, he wanted him to figure it out when Southern Indiana could not miss. Like they were throwing a beach ball in the ocean, type of shooting. But I'm encouraged by the direction. I like the players that they've got on the floor. I think the only concern that I have is the size. They need some size. But I don't know if they can do anything about that now.
I can speak from experience. You generally, once you are, 20, 21, are not going to get tall.
Right. Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but it's just true. But one last thing I think bears mentioning, the Missouri student section was impressive last night. It looked like the rest of the arena didn't look like, some of the games that we're used to, but the student section did. And that is the smartest thing that Desiree Reed Francois has done is told the students, we're keeping track of the games you go to. And if you want priority for the Kansas game, you better go to the other games. So you're going to have kids at that game so they can go to KU. I wish there was a way to do it for alumni too. But that's a little unfair to people that are trying to come from Kansas City and St. Louis. I mean, I don't blame anybody who doesn't spend 4 hours in the car for a 2-hour game that is on TV. Basketball is a sport that has to be more supported by the people within 45 minutes of campus because most people aren't coming from KC and St. Louis. But that student section was nuts. She was throwing out ice cream bars to him during a timeout at the exhibition. I actually I saw her talking and joking with the Antlers before the game. And I was talking to her and I said, I didn't know that someone in your position was allowed to be friends with the people in their position or to get along with them. And she said, what do you mean? I said, oh, that has not been a friendly relationship for about 20 years now. But she's trying to bring back, I mean, I honestly wish they could still go back to Hearns because I loved the environment there. But Mizzou Arena, we've been in it when it can be pretty wild. I mean, I still remember Fran Fraschilla in the Christian Moody game saying it's the loudest place he'd ever heard. And it does hold 15,000 people. And we've seen it for some of Mike Anderson's teams and that first year of Frank Haith when it can be even honestly, the Iowa State game where, for 142 glorious seconds of Michael Porter Jr., that place was bananas. So it can be that way. It's not going to be that way for Penn, but they're trying to do some things to bring them back. And I think they deserve a lot of credit for that. Now they have to win.
I think you're spot on about getting people from around the area to go to games. And because, I mean, that game started at 7 p.m. If you get off at 5 o'clock and you live in Kansas City or St. Louis, you're not making it by tip-off. So it is big, and I hate to put that on the shoulders of people that live in Columbia, but it shouldn't be that hard to put 15,000 people in the stands when the student section make up a large portion of that. And like you said, they looked great. Props to the student section. It looked fun. It reminded me of when I was at Mizzou because I was there during the Damari Carroll and, all of that. So it was super fun to be there. And the cool thing to do was go to basketball games. So I'm hoping they keep that up as well. I do want to say, though, if you're listening and you're an alum and you own those rich, expensive seats that are down low, give your ticket to somebody. If you're not going to go, ask somebody in the area if they want it. Because if you're just saving it for the big game, the KU game and stuff, I mean, just give the other tickets to somebody else. Let somebody else go. And so it looks like there's people in that arena because I'm sure a lot of people would love to have seats like that. And it just looks so much better when those gold seats are so bright. You can see every single empty gold seat. So yeah, give your tickets away.
Maybe they should have changed the color to black or something. I don't know. I'm no arena expert. But when it comes to seat colors, it's when the seats are red, you can really tell when people are in the stands, right? It's like with the Chiefs and stuff like that. You talk about the seat color, like the Royals having blue seats. The Royals' attendance hasn't been too great past couple of years. So you can really tell when there's nobody in the stands. And gold, I think, is the same color. You can really tell. Some of the videos I saw from the scrimmage, I believe that was that free to attend the scrimmage,
the WashU game,
the WashU game. Yeah, I guess it was an exhibition. It wasn't actually a scrimmage, but it was not very heavily attended.
No, I'd say 2,500 maybe.
Yeah, but I don't.
Most people didn't even know it was happening though. They scheduled it a week beforehand. That's the way it goes.
But yeah, no, I was impressed by the student section, by the turnout. I'm encouraged. I'm curious, I should say, to see what the turnout is for a Friday night game, against Penn. That'll be interesting to see. A 3-game week, for Mizzou, as they have, Southern Indiana. They happen on Monday, Penn on Friday, then Lindenwood on Sunday. Now Lindenwood is not going to. They're in the same conference, I believe, as Southern Indiana.
Screaming Eagles,
so
yeah.
they're going.
And
they're
both
going
are
to the Ohio
newly,
Valley.
they're both newly D1. And I just learned also yesterday that as a first-year D1 team, you cannot play in the NCAA tournament, which I did not know that either, because we were talking about, like, last night, me and, like, in my Twitter group chat, we were like, oh, this could be a team that could, scare some people if they had to play them and they got hot like that, and they were like, oh, they can't play in the first round. Or
I think that happened to Bellarmine last year.
That's what they used that example.
In D1, and they won their conference tournament and weren't allowed to play in the NCAA.
Holy cow! I did not know that. Wow, learn something new every day. Well, yeah, no,
that's why we're here, Tucker. We're just here to educate you, man.
Love to see it. Off to a good start in Missouri basketball. Hopefully it can distract you from Missouri football for a little bit. That's the goal. So thank you all for listening to today's Mizzou That's Who. Shout out to Charlie Hustle. We got a new Kansas City Sports Network line. Maggie rocking the shirt. I'm rocking the hoodie. Those are the two things that you can get. You can check the link below, or to go to charliehustle.com to get whatever you want for Charlie Hustle. The link in our description below is to get these KC Sports Network hoodie, the t-shirt. Go support us. We appreciate it. That's going to do it for this week's episode. We'll be back next week talking probably some more hoops and probably some more football, depending on what happens. Maybe we don't talk football. Maybe after the Tennessee game, we just say, you know what? We are now a basketball podcast. That could happen until Missouri plays Arkansas. So we'll see.
I'm in.
We'll see how that goes. But thank you all for listening all the way to the end. Let us know how you like the show. Leave a 5-star rating and review if you feel so inclined. Make sure to like the video and subscribe, and be a friend and tell a friend about the Mizzou That's Who podcast. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you guys next week.